Hey, what's happening, man? This is Trent Kaniuga, and today I've got for you the Hearthstone Set 5. This dude's name is the Kvaldir. I don't know. I think that's his race. But I didn't know much about the character. Actually, I haven't played WoW in quite some time. They canceled my lifetime membership to WoW after I left. I don't know how lifetime it is if they cancel it after you leave. But anyways, here I am. I'm drawing the Kvaldir Reaver, and these were the sketches. The way it works is that I get a little description that you can see at the bottom, and it doesn't have much information, just the setting and like what kind of action or feeling they want for it and how the card plays sometimes. And then sometimes they change that too. And I don't really know those details, but let's dig into it. So I already had my sketch. My sketch was approved by this point. I usually do about 3 rough sketches, and then I send it off to the art manager over there. Totally awesome dude. I've known him for years. He gave me my first World of Warcraft TCG assignment almost 10 years ago now. Yeah, it was 2006. And I just kept doing stuff for this guy because I feel like he's always pushing me to get better. And not in a way that some managers and art directors can be a little bit mm, abrasive about their feedback. And I always felt like this dude he's really good about it, and he does little drawings over the top, and he really tries to communicate visually. He knows how to communicate to artists visually on how to improve what they're doing. This particular card was a nightmare, though. This one was a real pain in the butt. I think I spent a total of like 25 hours on it, and the reason was not for any sort of commitment of rendering. I rendered and re-rendered and then re-rendered. It was almost as if I had completely forgotten how to paint, and I had forgotten. I was so engrossed in doing line art stuff, and none of the processes that I was trying were working. And I think over the course of a month, I spent all that time on this one, and mostly, I think it's because I was changing. I work on a lot of different types of games. I work on a lot of different styles of games, and going between them sometimes messes you up. You have to get into a stride all over again. And working on a game that required a lot of line art and iterative sketching, I had gotten so used to working with line art, and then the direction for Hearthstone has been to go a lot more painterly with things, and so I had to go back and study other artists who were working in acrylics and oils and more traditional mediums, or even just getting a more natural look to their paintings, and try to study and analyze that work and relearn in some ways, or try to recall how I approached things when I used to paint a little bit more in that style. And it's really hard to be really diverse, but you find yourself with more work when you are. I have some friends of mine who are very stylized, cartoony artists. A good friend of mine, Scotty Young, was saying, uh, I was asking him, how did you get away with kind of doing your own style for all these years? And he's like, well, you know, I've had editors try to change me and tell me, hey, you need to draw more realistic, or draw in a different art style. And his response was, I can't. And he's gotten very fortunate. He's been very lucky that he's been able to continue to really build a market and a niche for himself. And the style of art that he does is wildly popular right now. I think they're putting it on T-shirts and all kinds of stuff for Marvel. And he's got his own series coming out through Image right now. Um, I recommend you go check that out. Check out Scotty Young. I think he has a blog where he posts a lot of stuff regularly. Awesome dude, totally deserves his success. He found a niche market sticking to one style. I've had to really adapt. I've had to really change and learn a lot of different art styles. And I found that it's been beneficial for me working in games, to be as diverse as I possibly can. But when it comes to really finding my own voice, that's been a challenge for me for a long time. I would say that only in the last year have I really begun, I mean, since doing this painting, because I did this painting about a year ago. Since then, I've really gravitated a lot more towards a stylistic sort of line art type of approach, but I found a comfortability in it. And if you look at my Twilight Monk book, The Man in the Moonkin, that I'm developing right now, you can see where I found my stride. I found my comfort zone and how I like to grow and develop. But doing this piece, I was the stranger at the party who had forgotten completely who I was and what I was about and how I handled painting. And I think it was just a real challenge, this one. And I kept pushing myself to pull from photos, and I don't like to just drop photos into my paintings, although sometimes I will, especially if I repaint over it and give it a lot more of a organic, brushy feel. But you can see where a lot of times I'll just pull up imagery, and I think I did a color adjustment on that coral or those barnacles. These guys are supposed to be, they're sort of like I think they're like the dudes from Pirates of the Caribbean. So they're covered in barnacles and starfish, and there's just all these aquatic like parasites that stuck onto them, and so they're dragging seaweed and just I think they're supposed to be really creepy. And so normally I don't do a lot of like more creepy style painting, so this was a bit of a challenge for me in that way as well. Although I grew up looking at a lot of Frazetta, Death Dealer type of stuff, and I loved that kind of ominous dude coming out of the shadows, sort of warriors with the just way oversized muscles. I liked that stuff growing up, but and in my early years of developing as an artist, I was heavily inspired by that stuff. But I got away from it when I started doing the Creed comics because it was about teenage kids, and I found I draw a lot of stuff, a lot of books, and a lot of comics, and I guess a lot of my own universes, the character is generally like a teenage kid, and so I don't really draw a lot of big muscly dudes very much. And even working in concept art in game development, a lot of times you're painting over models. So, you know, because you're trying to fit into geometry, if they've got animations that they want to reuse and things like that, you're just kind of painting over and redesigning armor for characters. I've done a lot of that type of work, so I never really had to develop as a painter in terms of like studying anatomy and things like that. Although I've made it a little bit more of a priority these days because I'm working on such a diverse array of projects, but it certainly hasn't been my strength. I think that my strength is in probably more simple type of cartoony character designs or in the designing of the armor itself and thematic elements and consistent shape languages throughout and finding a unique voice and identity to make a character really punch and tell a story with a character. That's been my strength. So really it's kind of a fluke that I get a chance to do Hearthstone art because I'm not even really an illustrator. I'm more of a conceptual designer, but I've in the last year I've done so many more illustrations. It's been sort of a personal goal of mine to improve as an illustrator. And if you look at my earlier works, you can dramatically see, specifically with the World of Warcraft TCG, you can see a dramatic change and improvement, I think, in my painting skill. A lot of that just comes from studying and like how do you improve with painting? Study other painters and study paint from life or still frames from films, from movie shots, or when you see another artist has done something kind of neat and you want to understand how to do that, yeah, dig in and like literally sit down for an hour and spend a little time studying what that artist does. I have a series called Artist Exposed here on my YouTube channel, and that's got where I've only got one episode right now where I've studied Ashley Wood's processes and techniques, and I need to do a lot more of those. I really want to do one. I had studied Brahms' work years ago, and I'd like to do another one focused on studying Brahms' techniques and approach, possibly Frazetta. The kind of a way that I want to approach that series is as a study, not so much as any kind of true, like I titled it Artist Exposed, but it's really more that more that I wanted to study something and learn something from that artist in question and their style and their approach, or something that they do particularly well. Brahm has a really strong way of grouping shadows, and I really could have used that when I did this piece to get into that groove. One thing that you did notice if you were paying attention early on is that there's I was painting over a model for the face of this character, but I couldn't just leave it at that. You have to add a lot more detail to it. You have to add personality to it, wrinkles in the face, understanding, some understanding at least of the musculature beneath it. I wanted to give him those kind of undead eyes, the really sunken undead eyes. I was always not very particularly good with rendering metals. In this piece as well, I don't feel like it's the strongest representation of how I render metals, but I started painting. One of the gigs that I've been doing for the past 3 years actually is painting a lot of crests for a particular client, and these are like sort of faction crests. And I can't go into detail about it too much, but I can say that like I spent so many times painting and repainting different kinds of metals. Another example, completely unrelated, another example of where I really got a chance to focus on painting metals and just rendering metals was with the rewards for there are these badges when you're playing League of Legends. There are these badges that you get if you've reached new tiers, and in competition, they're basically these little medals, and they'll have like little wings, and some of them are bronze, and some are silver, and some are platinum. And I painted all those. Those are my paintings years ago. This was about 3 years ago, and not the most glamorous job. Nobody will ever know that I really did those, but the thing is what I got out of it was this intense, focused training on painting and rendering different forms of metal that I would have really, when you're doing a larger construction, a larger painting, you don't really get a chance to spend that kind of time and care really isolating one feature like that. And Stephen King would refer to that as your toolkit, and that would probably be like your more fine tools. I've recently been reading his book called On Writing, and he talks about your tools when you're writing and your toolbox. And a lot of times, guys will go in with the jackhammer to start out chiseling away the shape of a fossil, but at some point or another, you got to get in there with the finer tools. And so you can't just keep the jackhammer in your toolbox. You got to have all the finer tools too, and you've got to know how to use them so that when the time comes, you're not just destroying everything and breaking everything apart. I think that when I was doing this piece, and one of the reasons why I almost didn't post this painting, because it shows such a lack of confidence. But then I also realized that it's very important for I think it's very important for you guys to see that even though I've been doing this for 20 years, I still have days and times when I'm struggling, and times where I've sort of need to go back and check to make sure that I know how to handle all the tools in my toolbox as well. And getting back to the basics and the fundamentals, no matter how far along you are and how advanced you are, I think it's essential to keep up those skills. I think it's also detrimental to you when you've got everybody telling you that what you're doing is great. I think that we've seen that with some film directors and some other comic book artists who I won't mention, but recently there's like a comic book that's coming out, and it's sort of made by one of the industry's biggest legends. But it's very clear looking at the artwork that this particular guy, he either doesn't care about the project, or he has sort of forgotten the basics of the fundamentals of drawing, and it's there's a big outcry about it right now. And I hope that never happens to me. I hope I never get sort of too big to fail, so to speak, or too successful that or so successful that everybody just tells me everything I'm doing is great. I think it's important to have constructive criticism, but more importantly, to be able to look at your own work and to be able to say, yeah, this isn't my strength, but this other thing is, and I know how to emphasize my strengths, play up my strengths so that I can get work, and that work keeps paying the bills, and it keeps me fed, and it keeps me motivated and driven, and I know confidently that I'm good at doing this. And then to also know where some things are not my strength, and there are some jobs that I'll turn down. I will turn down jobs simply because I know I won't do a great job at that, and the client is not going to be happy with my end result. But mostly that's kind of wrapping this one up. I mean, we're really close to the end of what I had recorded here. I'm going to show you, of course, the final results, and judge for yourself. I feel like this is one of my weakest Hearthstone cards. If you compare it to some of the other ones that I've done, and I'd like to do a video actually really looking at the landscape of all of the World of Warcraft TCG cards that I've done, and the Hearthstone cards. I would say at this point I've done over 50. That's an awful lot, but it's, of course, over the course of 10 years. So, but it'd be interesting to take a look back. I really want to mention that towards the end of this one, I had spent so much time on it that I just called in the help of my assistant, Danny Kong, to help out with some of the colors in the final version, and that really helped out a lot. And it really helps to have a team or to have another artist that you can sort of bounce things off of. He did a quick little paint over towards the end, and then I tweaked that. It got sent back and forth between the art manager on Hearthstone and us about 8 times. Like I said, this one was a real challenge. And sorry that the video has some jerky spots. In the video production, it was spliced together from there was a lot of hiccups in the recording process as well. This one was tough to put together in video as well. For you dudes who are just tuning in, I really appreciate you stopping by. Thank you so much. If you like what you're watching, please hit that subscribe button right there. I've got a Patreon going, and I've got some tutorials, a huge box set of tutorials on Gumroad. If you'd like to see more and you want to learn my process and really understand the finer details of how I approach things, and also get into my head a little bit. I go pretty in depth on a lot of stuff in there about being a concept artist, about being a freelancer, and telling good stories, and what I feel are essential things that you need to keep in mind as a creative person working in the entertainment industry, or just trying to make something cool, like how do you get there faster? Hopefully I can help out a lot of people. I've gotten a lot of really great responses from people telling me that it's changed their approach creatively, and it's improved their work process, and that's awesome, man. I love to hear that kind of a thing. If you have questions, drop them in the comments below, of course, and I will see you guys in the next video. Ciao.